Evening, folks. Hope you can hear me okay. It's a bit strange talking into a screen, but let's give it a whirl. I think everyone's in. Let's go in maybe a few more. Just a little bit of housekeeping, folks, if that's all right. If you could just make sure you are muted, because I get a lot of background noise coming through the computer. And also, if you have any questions, if you just click the chat button, the chat box at the bottom, you'll see a little text box come up on the right hand side. You can put a little question in there and we can come to them at the end. Brilliant. So let's go. Herd fertility management. That's tonight's topic. So things to cover. Well, I thought we'd just go for a few basics first. The life cycle of a dairy cow. We'll look at the estrus cycle of a dairy cow. And why fertility is important. We bang on about it as vets. Get your cows in calf. Why is it so important? Why do we go on about it? Key areas to focus on as well with herd fertility, we'll come on to that. And the cow after calving, what challenges she faces and how she can overcome them to be productive and successful. And then the last but not least, certainly not least, improving herd fertility from a nutritional perspective. So that's our things to cover this evening. So life cycle of a dairy cow. So we'll start right from the beginning. So a calf hits the ground. We're reared on milk. We're weaned anywhere between sort of 6-8 weeks. Then we're reared through to first mating, which is anywhere from sort of 13 to 15 months as a target. And we work through our first pregnancy when we get them in calf. And then the heifer calves in. So between calving and breeding, we have a period known as the voluntary wait period. And that's a period of time in which we allow the cow to recover after calving before we start breeding. Then we move around into our mating period where we're trying to get the cow pregnant, and hopefully we do so. And then she moves around through her gestation. And around sort of 6 to 8 weeks pre-calving, the cow's dried off. She stopped milking to give that udder a bit of a rest, allow that udder to regenerate and get ready for that next lactation. And cows go round and round this cycle until they become uneconomical to keep anymore. And then they are sent down the road. So that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour of a dairy cow life cycle. So the estrus cycle of a dairy cow. Apologies about the busy graph. There is a few busy graphs throughout the talk. I apologise. I'll try and talk you through them. I think they are quite good at showing what's going on. So we all know cows come into heat every 3 weeks. So if we start here, this is an egg that ovulates when the cow's in heat. And then this egg that ovulates forms this structure called a CL, if you've ever heard a vet say that. So that's a CL on an ovary. And that CL stops the cow coming in heat until about day 16, when that CL disappears and the animal can come back in heat. In the meantime, there's a large reserves of very small, quiet eggs or follicles, we call them, on ovaries. And they come up for reasons we're not sure why, in small groups. And ultimately, they're weaned out to find this one egg or two if it's going to be a twin ovulation. And the egg's ready to ovulate, and it does ovulate if this CL isn't here. So you can see here, this cow's had 3 waves, more likely a heifer, with 3 waves here. So egg comes up. Am I ready to ovulate or not? No, sorry, I'm not. That CL's still there. New wave starts. And that's the estrus cycle of a cow in a nutshell. So why is fertility so important? It has a huge, huge financial impact on a dairy unit. For every day a cow is not pregnant when it should or could be, that's £3 to £5 to the farmer. A missed heat, 100 quid. It adds up. It really does. In herds that don't have the finger on the pulse there. So a pure example here, we've got a 100 cow herd. If we can reduce the calving interval, i.e. the number of open days in a herd by 20 days, a bit of fag packet mass calculation, we're talking £8,000, and that's probably conservative as well. So on the right hand side, we've got a bit of a list of all the different components that add up to give us this financial figure. We've got loss of milk production, too many dry days, too many stale cows. We want cows in fresh cows with high yields, producing a lot of milk with good margins. We'll come on to that in a minute. Disruption to overall milk pattern. We're losing older animals. We're having to cull them. We're not getting back in calf. These girls are profitable animals. They've paid for themselves. They give a lot of milk versus what heifers would do. So we're losing those girls as well. If you're having to throw more semen into a herd because they aren't holding, they aren't sticking because your fertility is not quite there, you'll have additional AI costs. And if you're not getting cows sticking, you'll have ourselves involved trying to get these cows back in calf. So that will incur extra vet costs to a unit. Reduce calf sales as well. If you get herds that inherently aren't very fertile, they're not producing as many calves per unit time. So you haven't got the calves to sell, the beef calves to sell, and obviously your replacements to come through as well. If you're having to cull a lot of animals because you aren't getting them in calf, you have to keep a lot more replacements to replace those losses with. Keeping more replacements ties up more money. So that's pretty inefficient from an economic point of view on a dairy herd. And again, we've all seen these and we've all had them. We've had really good cows, brilliant genetics. We just can't get it hold, or something's gone on with that cow and it goes down the road. Massive shame. A lot of genetics go down the road. But unfortunately, fertility is the most common reason a cow will end up in an abattoir. So it's a big problem. It really is. So doing everything you can to try and counteract it is really, really worthwhile. So a bit of an example of a graph here. I'll just talk you through it. We've got two cows here. We've got the Hetch line, which is cow B. That's got two calvings that are nearly 550 days between each other. We've got the other cow A here. She's got a 365-day calving interval, so she's calved twice in a year. She's done really well. Now the amount of milk each of these produce is underneath each line. So we can see here we have two peaks with the cow that's calved twice in a year. With the cow that's calved over twice in 550 days, a lot staler cow, took a lot longer to get back in calf. You can just see the areas under the graph. There's a lot more milk with here and here versus all of here. And this forms a basis of fertility. We need to get cows back in calf, turn them round, let them hit peak. This is the milk that we're after. This is the profitable milk. Just putting a few financials on it as well. Again, we've got the blue line here. That's our milk yield in litres. So we can see a cow comes into lactation. She comes up and peaks. And as lactation goes on, the milk yield decreases. Here we've got the dry matter intake. We'll talk about dry matter a little bit. Dry matter is ultimately what's left over in feed when water is taken away. So nutrients in the feed. So we can see here in early lactation, we've got a high milk yield and we've got sort of a moderate to reasonable dry matter intake. But look at the margin. We've got quite a wide gap here. So these girls are pumping out a good amount of milk for what feed's going into them. These are really profitable animals. If we look at the other end of the spectrum down here, the margin tightens, the milk yield drops, and these cows still need quite a bit of feed to maintain themselves and keep ticking over and keep producing a bit of milk what they are. So you can see it's within a herd's financial interests to keep as many cows around this area as possible. So what do we want to achieve? We've talked about calving interval. By definition, that is a number of days between two consecutive calvings. The optimum key performance indicator, we want it to be about a year, 365 to 380 days. Over 480 days, i.e. with a 280 gestation and 200 days to get that cow in calf, that's very undesirable. If you remember about this graph, there's going to be a lot of girls up here not making a lot of money for you. So that's very undesirable to have stale cows. And these cows are prone to getting fat and causing problems, and we'll come on to that a little bit later. But ultimately, if we want a 380-day calving interval, which is the sweet spot, that's brilliant, that's financial optimum. We need a cow in calf ideally by 100 days in milk because we've got a 280-day gestation ultimately. The voluntary wait period, that period after a cow calves, we let it have a rest, let it recover, recuperate, and then we start inseminating. We've gone through half of that already. So ultimately, we've got around about 50, 60 days to try and get that cow back in calf. We've got a 3-week cycle. So we've not got many attempts to get that cow in calf in this economic optimum period of time. So the big challenge with fertility in herds is to find them in heat, get them served, and get them to hold, generate them pregnancies for 100 days, really profitable to a dairy unit. So a checklist for a pregnancy, just running through a few basics. What do we need for a pregnancy in a cow? Well, firstly, we need a cow that's cycling, that will ovulate, that will release an egg, that will get fertilized. We need ovulation of an egg that's actually healthy and viable, that will form an embryo. The uterus, where the pregnancy occurs, that needs to be in a fit state. No infection, inflammation, anything nasty going on in there. We need a cow to be inseminated when she's actually in heat. Sounds ridiculous to say, but 10 to 15% of cows are served when they're not in heat. So again, heat detection accuracy really comes into play, and efficient heat detection. Finding them cows in calf, don't let them slip by. Time's money. On the male side of things, if we're AIing versus a bull, we need healthy, viable semen, and we need to go in the right place at the right time. So again, AI technique and semen handling is really important in that department. Fertilization success. About 90% of cows are in calf at day 7 after service, so that's a fairly efficient process there. This is where the main love losses come. An embryo has to grow and grow sufficiently well. And what the embryo does in that uterus, it sends a signal to mum saying, well, don't throw me out, don't come back in heat, I'm here, you're pregnant. And for that signal to be strong, that embryo needs to grow well to produce a strong signal to its mother. And again, after that, the blood supply from the mother needs to reach the fetus to nourish it. So ultimately, we need the formation of a placenta. So you can see there's quite a few points here to achieve or have a good chance of achieving a viable pregnancy. So I've just listed a few things here that I think are really good opportunities to focus on farms, try and improve pregnancy production. By no means exhaustive, but we'll just run through them quickly. So first, heat detection, what we spoke about. You've got to find them. If you don't serve a cow, it isn't going to get in calf. You've got to find them. Artificial insemination skill set. Even experienced inseminators can benefit from refresher courses and things. Having really good technique, being really stringent on your semen handling is really, really important, because percentage points mean money in this game. First insemination window, what's your farm policy on your voluntary wait period? Do you wait too long? Are you compromising the amount of time you have to get that cow served and in calf in that economical period of time? So how soon are you going in? Re-inseminating cows that have failed to become pregnant. Cows that are empty cost money, that £3 to £5 a day. If they're not in calf, you need to be really efficient and on it, getting these cows re-inseminated to try and achieve that pregnancy. Pregnancy diagnosis frequency. How often do you have cows PD'd? What stage do you get them PD'd at? Are you PD'ing them at 8 weeks? Are you leaving them a little bit longer? Don't forget, empty cows cost money. The whole point of PDing cows is brilliant, you find a pregnancy, but it's the empty cows where you get the financial gain. So again, PDing early enough to that 5-week mark, and PDing frequently to find those empty cows, get them reserved. That's where it really does pay to invest in fertility intervention. Controlling diseases. This sort of goes without saying, really. Lameness, mastitis, endemic problems on farm, keeping them to an absolute minimum. Cows do not look upon these problems favourable from a reproductive point of view. Then infectious diseases as well. You'll hear us vets back on about this a lot, and rightly so. These diseases cause a lot of problems with fertility, so having a handle on them, having them in control, is definitely a good thing when it comes to trying to improve your pregnancy production on farm. Transition health management. Transition cows are where cows go from dry to lactation. So we're talking the last sort of 3 weeks of dry period, first 3 weeks of lactation. This is absolutely huge. Some people will argue that fertility is a metabolic disease in dairy cows, and rightly so. It has a huge effect. We'll really go into a little bit of detail with that a little bit later on. Early detection and aggressive treatment of disease. Animals have problems, don't want to get in calf. They're not ready to get in calf. Finding these problems early, turning these cows around, will help to get them back in calf ultimately. So the cow calves, Let's follow her path. Let's see what challenges she faces. First things first, those at the afterbirth has to come out. If that's sticking in there, it's going to cause a problem. It's a nidus for infection. An infection in uteruses cause problems with fertility, as we spoke about earlier. We need a healthy uterus for a pregnancy. Uterine involution, or how a uterus shrinks after calving. If you can imagine that uterus has carried a calf, how big it is. If you've ever seen a calf bed out or cesarean done, they're a fair structure. And that has to shrink to something that will nearly fit in your hand. About 3 weeks, they're about sort of 13 kilos at calving, and they shrink a good 12 kilos in 3 weeks. That's pretty impressive weight loss. That's a heck of a change inside that cow. The inner lining is really important to where the placenta is going to form in the next pregnancy. But so the inner lining, it takes 25 days to sort of regenerate back to its normal non-pregnant state. And again, the deeper layers of the uterus, 6 to 8 weeks. So you can see why we have this period where we allow cows just to recover from calving and allow that uterus to shrink down. Bacterial contamination of the uterus. An open cervix at calving ultimately leads to bacterial contamination. 90+ cows will get contamination of their uterus, and it is up to their immune system to get rid of that infection out of that uterus. They need to overcome negative energy balance. We'll speak about that in a bit more depth. And start cycling. We need a cow to start ovulating after. If we need a cow in calf, as we said, we have to have a cow that is cycling and will ovulate that healthy egg. Group change. Don't underestimate social stress in cows. Cows are nasty things. They really do bully each other. You know, it's like the new kid in the playground scenario. You know, they really don't like new kids on the block. They want to sort the hierarchy out. They want to know who's boss and who isn't, and say that social stress can cause big problems with cows and with intakes in cows. And the diet change as well. They're going from a fairly Weetabix-esque diet onto a really high-flying diet. So trying to manage that over to keep the rumen health, to keep them digesting the diet properly is a really, really important aspect. So negative energy balance. Basically, it's just a mismatch between how much I can eat and how much energy is my udder draining from me to produce milk. So we see the challenge period here. We've got the transition phase coming up to calving. The cow starts to bag up, colostrum production, energy demand on the cow starts to increase. And ultimately, when she comes into lactation, her energy requirement fires through the roof. Milk production starts. And the biggest challenge is trying to get the cow to eat enough. As soon as this is corrected, the cow's in a better state. She's ready to breed. Her brain's saying, let's go, we're good to go. So just bear that in mind. But yeah, basically, it's just an energy shortage. I cannot eat enough to sustain myself. So how hard are your cows working? Cows are unbelievable athletes. If I just give you this as an example, we've got a maintenance here on the left hand, on the y-axis there. Maintenance is basically, what do I need to sustain myself, to keep myself ticking over? We've got a marathon runner here. They'll eat twice maintenance, so they need quite a bit of energy to keep going. We've got an Arctic explorer, so obviously they're losing a lot of energy through heat and also probably exhaustion. So we're talking sort of 3.5 times maintenance. Look at where a high yielding cow is. 5.5 times maintenance. They are absolute machines. They are working really, really hard and asking a lot of themselves. This graph gives me a lot of respect for cows. They're phenomenal animals. So we talked about this dry matter and the intake. How much is a cow able to eat? Now, unfortunately, as a norm, around calving, animals just don't eat as much. This is due to hormonal changes around calving, and also, if you can imagine having a late gestation uterus in your abdomen, there isn't a lot of room left for your rumen. So obviously your intakes go down. They drop by about 30–40% around calving. And we spoke about this negative energy balance, this mismatch between how much I can eat and how much my udder's draining from me for milk. The nadir, or the lowest point, or the worst shape the cow is in metabolically, is usually around about 2 weeks. The whole challenge with transition management is keeping this line as high as possible. Keep these cows eating, plenty of energy in there. Otherwise, we're going to run into problems, which we'll just talk about in a minute. So, ovulation after calving. From an evolutionary point of view, these cows are clever. This brain functions to keep this cow alive. It's function for this cow to survive and also to reproduce. Now, if times are bad, I'm in negative energy balance, I've stressed, I've got a lot of disease going on, I've lost a lot of weight, that's telling this cow it's probably not a good time to breed. Why would I want to risk myself and put a lot of energy and reserves of my body into something when times don't look good? That doesn't make sense. Ultimately, there's a pathway between the brain and the ovary. The brain talks to the ovary talks back. So after calving, we're talking about them waves coming up again. Is it going to, can I ovulate an egg? Am I in a good shape? What am I looking like? Do I risk it this time or do I wait? And ultimately, the frequency from the brain is a lot weaker, doesn't allow the ovary to get going in times when the cow's in negative energy balance, i.e. she's not ready for a pregnancy, she needs to look after herself. Body conditions, scar loss, disease and stress, it all impairs the signal from here to here. The cow doesn't cycle, it stays quiet, it's not ready to get in calf. Also, looking at the egg on the ovary, these develop over about a 3-month period. So, you get an insult like negative energy balance. These eggs are feeling it 3 months before they even think about ovulating. So you do get a bit of a lag in where you've had a stress period and your fertility will drop because those eggs have not developed in an adequate state metabolically. And also, if there's any infection kicking around, these toxins and nasty things have been shown to work their way into eggs and cause problems as well. So these are the challenges facing the fresh calf cow. I'm trying to get ovulating again, trying to get going, trying to get ticking over so she's ready to get pregnant. So the first ovulation after calving, don't be alarmed how complicated this is, not too bad. You can see here cow calves, and we spoke about these groups of eggs that start coming up. This is the first one after calving. We're getting going again. Let's go. These come up every 7 to 10 days, regardless, during this early lactation. So we reach this sort of 10 to 14 day point. Now there's 3 things that egg can do, depending on what the cow is telling it. It can ovulate and form this corpus luteum. Brilliant, that's great. That cow's cycling, she's in good shape, she's going to do well. Well, it just doesn't quite get there. There's a bit of a cough, a bit of a splutter. Oh, we're going cystic. This follicle just doesn't quite ovulate. It just sits there and doesn't quite manage it. The third option is the follicle dies. It's not strong enough, or the brain doesn't signal to it strong enough that it's ready. So they're the 3 things that can happen. And the best analogy I can give you is pulling a lawnmower cord. We've got the egg, the engine. What shape's that in? Is it good? Is it well oiled? Is it ready? And we've got the signal from the brain pulling. And we can see if we pull hard, good strong signal, healthy egg, the engine starts, we're away. If we pull it reasonably hard, the it's not too bad. It's been better. It's been stood a while. It might cough and splutter a little bit. That's a cyst. And if it's really dead, there's no pull from the brain. It's really not ready, or the egg's really in bad shape. This engine's broke. Nothing happens. So that's the best analogy I can give you on a cow on its first ovulation after calving. Them ovaries getting going again. So when do cows, how fast do they cycle after calving? What's normal? What's abnormal? What's the performance usually? The average time to first ovulation is around about 32 days for high-yielding Holstein. So it's probably that third egg, that third wave that comes along, roughly speaking. This ranges a lot though, anywhere from 4 days, a bit of an outlier abnormal, right up to 175 days. Heck, these cows have really struggled to get going, and will more than likely have had some serious problems going on. Well, this is a really important take-home message from this slide is about 1/5 of cows have not ovulated by 50 days. Their brain and ovaries have gone, nah, I'm not quite ready yet. I'm not in good shape. I'm not feeling it yet. And this is really detrimental to herd fertility performance. Ultimately, this is the cow's brain responding to what shape am I in? Have I got enough food? Am I in pain? What's going on? Usually the first ovulation occurs about a week or two after they return to positive energy balance, i.e. they're eating enough to sustain themselves. The brain's saying, yep, I'm ready now. I'm not in trouble. Times are looking good. Good time to get pregnant. So see here, the first ovulation after calving, if that's before 30 days in a cow that's in good shape, they tend to get served earlier, tend to get in calf earlier. That's a profitable cow. The flip side, cows that have struggled, not quite ready to ovulate, the brain's saying, no, hold on a minute, I'm not quite ready. These cows take longer to get served, and don't forget, time is money, £5 a day. These cows get in calf a lot later. They're stale, the margins aren't there with the feed, they get fat, and that's going to cause a problem for us. And again here, sorry about the busy graph, but this really does ring true. This is the proportion of cows that get pregnant. This is your number of days in milk. So the faster this shoots up, the faster cows are getting in calf. So we can see here we have our first ovulation before 50 days. This is the dark mark. This is this line here. They're doing well. They're flying in calf. By 100 days, we're up at, getting on 50% in calf. Brilliant. Hit target, super. These cows that struggle, don't quite get going. They're here, the clear squares. They get in calf, takes a little bit longer, but ultimately, look at the end. A lot less cows have got in calf overall. These are your culls. They've gone. They've cost you a lot of money going down the road. So take-home message is the cows that take longer to come to ovulate, they're in good shape. Take longer to get in calf if they do so, and they are less likely to get in calf full stop and more likely to go down the road. So you can see early ovulation is really important to herd fertility performance. So Sam, you're talking about delayed ovulation. Well, what's causing it? What are the main issues? Well, if we look at the factors that are affecting the odds ratio, we see acute body condition loss. Cows that really do lose a lot of weight and are really struggling. They're burning energy because they just cannot keep up with the supply. These are the ones that really, really struggle to ovulate. Clinical ketosis. Ketosis is a disease, again, a syndrome of energy mismatch. I cannot eat enough to sustain myself. My liver struggles and I develop ketosis. Clinical disease, uterine infection or a difficult calving, again, significant, causing problems with delayed ovulation. But again, here's the argument, nutrition and management of transition cows. These two issues cause the biggest problem with getting cows back in calf in an economical period of time. So how do we measure body reserves in cows? Where do they sit? Body condition scoring is a system we use. It's a practical means of assessing how much energy reserve a cow has. It's a 5-point scale that works on quarter-point increments. And obviously, the fatter the cow, the higher the score. The leaner the cow, the lower the score. These scores are based on specific anatomical regions on cows. And it's based on the fat cover that's around here and actually the contours, how angular things are. It's a really useful tool for nutritional management, and these numbers have great significance on whether you're hitting targets and likely to run into problems or not, and we'll just come on to that in a minute. But if you go online onto AHDB, there's a really good flow chart on how to body condition score your cows. So it's a really good thing to get into, to keep an eye on how your herd is looking nutritionally across the board. So effective condition score. So the main message from this graph is that the main factor affecting body condition loss after calving. Now, we said that's really important. The cows that lose more weight take longer to come round, less likely to get in calf. Are these fat cows? We've got condition score change here. This is the condition score at the point the cow calves. So we've got a condition score of 2. These cows don't change too much. They don't lose that much weight. We go to the other extreme, the fatter cow, we've got condition score 4. They've lost a full condition score, a lot of weight, a lot of flesh has come off them cows. So you can see here the importance is having cows in an optimum body condition score at calving. If they're fat, you will lose them. There's no way keeping them back. They cannot eat enough. Fat cows have a reduced appetite. They do not eat enough and they melt, absolutely melt. You've seen them on farms, everyone's got them. They just struggle. They really do. So it's really important to have body condition score correct for the point of calving. And dry period is not the time to do it. Do it late lactation. 200 days in milk, body condition score. Let's have a look at you. Can I slim you down? Can I do something with you? Don't mess with dry cows if you can help it. So body condition score on first ovulation. So we spoke about these body condition score units. Now, again, same take-home message, just a different way of putting it across. Cows that lose less weight, i.e. cows that calve in good condition at calving, they take about that 30 days to ovulate. Again, more likely to get served early, more likely to get in calf early, more likely to stay in the herd. We go to the other extreme, these fat cows that lose a lot of weight, they're up at 50 days time to ovulation. We spoke about 100 days getting there to try and get in calf. We aren't hardly cycling by the time we're halfway through that period. And the more cycles a cow has, the more fertile she becomes. So this is why these girls that are fat, lose a lot of weight, just don't get going, end up going down the road. We might argue on this, actually, thin cows, Sam. Well, you know, what's wrong with these? They don't lose a lot of weight. You know, that's good, isn't it? Well, actually, it's not brilliant. Now, the problem is with thin cows, it's been shown that there is a fat pad in the foot, acts as a bit of a cushion. Thin cows lose that fat pad and it makes them a lot more susceptible to lameness. So lameness is one reason why thin cows at calving are bad news to you. Also, increased risk of retained fetal membranes. Getting rid of fetal membranes relies on a good immune response. If a cow's thin and struggling, she's probably not going to have a sort of robust immune response to get rid of that cleansing. And again, increased risk of poor fertility, low production because of these reasons. So thin cows probably won't lose a lot of weight, but they're still not going to be productive to you. So again, hitting that 2.5, 3 body condition score, that sweet spot is absolutely ideal at calving. This is the slippery slope. We get a fat, this is just summarising the job really. Fat cows at calving, they just cannot eat enough. They cannot eat enough. The rumens are small, they're just not doing, the bag's sapping them. They just lose so much condition. They take a longer time to get cycling, longer to get pregnant, less likely to become pregnant. And these melting fat cows, we see a lot of these as vets that cause a lot of problems. 75% of disease problems are in the first month of lactation. And a lot of them are because of these fat cows. You get DAs, more likely to get milk fever, retain cleansings, ketosis, you name it, fat cows are at risk to it. But these fat cows, not only have you ploughed a lot of money into these, putting a lot of weight onto them, which, yeah, you might be able to cull them and gain that back financially, but heck, it's cost you a lot of money, that cow going down the road, premature to what it could have done. So negative energy balance, what can we do about it? It's normal. All animals will experience some degree of negative energy balance in early lactation, but the aim is to reduce the size of that negative energy balance and the duration it occurs for. If we can minimize that, we're going to have cows in pretty good shape to get back in calf. Ultimately, it relies on transition. We need the cows to eat enough. If there's anything you need a cow to do, it's to have a good appetite and eat enough. And also to digest it effectively, have a good balanced ration, a good transition over to that lactating diet. A cow can eat as much as it wants. If it scours out and the rumen health's not there, it's not getting the nutrients that it needs. Apologies about the busy slide, but some really important points here. So dry cow management, these are key areas that you really must have right on farm to maximize the amount of dry matter a cow can eat. Again, we've just spoke about 2.5 to 3 body condition. They're the cows that won't lose too much body condition and do okay versus thin or fat cows, what we spoke about. Don't alter body condition score in the dry period. The last thing a dry cow needs is overfeeding or underfeeding. Both are equally as bad and can cause problems with metabolic disease around calving. The aim with a dry cow is maintenance, what we spoke about. Just to maintain yourself, keep yourself there, ready for calving, good intake, ready for lactation. 24 hours access to fresh, palatable, a well-balanced ration. This isn't rocket science. It's really just basic fundamentals, getting them right. Feed space. You need a minimum of 75 centimeters, ideally up near a meter if you can, of feed space. Now, you might argue, well, you know, Sam, they can all get to feed, that's fine. But the problem is cows are herd animals. They like to do things together. If you have a cow that wants to go feed and it can't quite get in because the bully cow's there, that cow will go sit down, it won't eat. It's not going to come back, its intake will drop. So having enough room to cater for all the cows in the building is absolutely critical to keeping your dry matter intake. Again, head yolks, I'm probably the biggest fan in terms of head yolks with intakes. It's putting metal between them and the cow, albeit it can stop bullying from side to side. I think the post and rail barriers with plenty of room work pretty well. Add fresh, clean water as well. Water is really important. These cows, particularly dry cows, are on a very dry ration. It's like chewing Weetabix. The rumen needs water. Water is an essential nutrient. We need to provide good, clean water. 10 centimeters of linear trough space per cow is what the recommendation is. Space. Giving these cows enough room. The recommendation is about 1 meter squared per 1,000 litre milk production per cow per year for loose house cows, plus a third again for loafing feeding area. So we're about 1.25, 1.3 meters squared per 1,000 litres. Really important. Give cows enough room. Overstock a dry cow building, it will give you problems. Cows on cubicles as well. Again, adequate quantity. Have a surplus of cubicles. Give cows choices. Let them sit down where they want to. Don't let them get bullied out. And the size that they fit in. Cow comfort. Cows lie down, ruminate. That's where they're most comfortable. They're off the feet. Cow comfort, really important. Avoid overcrowding the pre-calving group, as I said. The problem is calving patterns usually aren't level. You have busy periods and you have quieter periods. Now, having a third, a capacity that's greater than what your average is, up to sort of 30%, allows for these busy times where you don't compromise room. Most of the time you might be understocked, but the idea is to never overstock your buildings. You put too many animals in one space, competition goes high, bullying increases, intakes are down. That's a disaster. Try not to let that happen. Again, avoidance of unnecessary group changes. You put a cow into a new group of cows, her intakes are down, she's stressed, she's bullied around. Am I top of the tree? Am I bottom of the tree? Where am I? It really is an understated point with the dynamics of cows moving around and what it does to them. So trying to reduce the number of group changes and moving them to near calving as well. Ideally, they want to be set, a couple of weeks before calving where they're going to be. Moving a cow too near calving can upset her intakes again, the stress of moving, and that's really detrimental. If you're ever going to move a cow that's near calving, stage 2 labour is the best. That's when labour's in full flow and they're basically getting on with it. They won't be eating anyway. And again, moving cows, do it in pairs if you can. They stay as mates, particularly heifers, little groups of heifers. They do a lot better if you move them together. Putting isolated animals into different groups, they're going to get kicked a lot harder socially. So outliers, whatever you do on a farm, you will always end up with cows that are too fat or too thin. That's just life. So what can we do about these cows that are outside the optimum? The possible actions, we've got cows that are too thin. Well, is she carrying twins? Is she just struggling a bit? Check your PD records. Is she thin because of a reason? Has she got a disease problem going on? Check her out, Room and fill. How full is she? Is she eating as much as what she should be? Is that left-hand side pushed out behind the ribs? Is that rumen nice and full? If it isn't, ask questions why. You could also, if you run 2 groups, a close-up group tends to have probably a little bit more energy. Then you could move her up a little bit early to give her a little bit more TLC from that point of view. Keep on loose housing as well. We spoke about cows with low body condition having a reduced amount of fat in that foot, reduced cushion. If you keep them on straw after calving, that's going to help. It's going to be a lot more forgiving on the feet versus concrete. And again, these thin cows are really prone for metabolic disease. So, using supplements such as Kextone boluses and other things like that in accordance with your veterinary health plan can really help these cows pull through sort of less than ideal conditions for themselves. If they're too fat, again, similar problems, really prone to postpartum disease and fertility problems. Again, on bolus in conjunction with your veterinary health plan. Really good idea. Post-calving drenches. Propylene glycol is just a source of energy you can pour down a cow's neck to give it a bit of a boost. And again, as much TLC as possible. Get these cows eating. They're under pressure. They don't need any other problems to come along and kick them while they're down, essentially. And again, rumen fill. How much is she eating? They say don't try and get the cow to lose weight in the dry period. That's a disaster. That tells the cow it's a stressful time and they go into a bit of a meltdown, and it just sets them up totally wrong for lactation. So be really wary of that. Dry period should be just maintenance. Take a cow through nice and steady, get her eating plenty, ready for lactation. So just talk a little bit more about social stress and how important it is. Now, there's this phenomenon of the stress-free calving line that I'm going to put across to you. Basically, what we're trying to do is group cows together and keep them together as a stable group through the dry period. So we're not putting a few in, taking a few out, mixing social hierarchies up. So ideally, you would have a pre-calving group, again, that 3 weeks pre-calving, and it would be adjacent to a fresh calve group with a calving pen maybe in the middle. And again, we can keep these cows together, move them together, keep them as a friendship group, if you like. And it really does help keep intakes up. Again, say if you have a small little fresh calf group as well from the main herd, these can be taken to the parlour, milked, taken back. They're away from the feed less time, then go lie back down. It really helps with time budget. If they're in a collecting yard with 300 cows, they could be waiting quite a while to get back to that feed. If there's ever a cow you don't want to compromise intakes, it's that fresh cow or the dry cow, because it really does cause problems. And again, I'll emphasize it, put it in bold again, do not overstock hens. It really does cause a problem. We see it all the time as vets. We have a busy calving period, we've got a lot of animals in a building, and all of a sudden the wheels fall off. And it's really important to get that right. Just a little point at the end as well. Herringbone parlours, if you build a fresh calf group, if it fits in with your population dynamics in your herd, it's probably quite useful to have group size if you can. That's sort of the size of, a side of the parlour. It just makes it easier, the logistics of milking. So this is just a diagrammatic example of a stress-free calving line. So you can see that you can get a group of cows into pen one, dried off together, whatever number that may be, as long as it's not compromising space. That's brilliant. Those cows stay together, they move along, keep going. Same environment, same friends, moving along, very stress-free. Again, all the way through to calving, and away they go. So that can be a pretty useful system, fairly simple to implement as well. This is it in practical terms on a farm. We've got the pre-calvers here, and again, adjacent, we've got a little calving area if needed with a useful calving gate. Calving gate's really useful for restraining animals, examinations, bolusing, etc. And then they move into the fresh cow. So you can see groups of cows are just bobbing along, not mixing with too many different cows coming in there, here, there, and everywhere, upsetting the social balance in the group. So these are a few common issues that we'd see on farm. We'll take the one on the left-hand side to begin with. Spot the problem. Looks a reasonable building, decent feed face, feed barrier looks adequate. We're not seeing a lot of sores on the necks or anything. But you can see they haven't probably fed out as sort of broad as what they could right down here. So again, you're compromising feed space when you actually have the capacity to do it. We do see this. So you just put it out a little bit and look at this cow. Can she get in? Should she be getting in? Is she eating as much as what she should be? It just begs the question. Again, right-hand side, the straw. Too long. They're just sorting through it. This straw is really important. It's low energy density. These cows don't need a lot to sustain themselves for maintenance. It's really important this straw goes in, fill the rumens with fibre, get their appetite up. These cows aren't touching it. They're just brushing through it and getting the goodies out, the things that maybe taste a bit better, it's palatable. So again, chopping your straw, having a well-balanced ration can really help intakes. So summary, fertility is really important financially on a dairy unit. More fertile herds make a lot more money. Good transition management, as we've really emphasised all the way through. If you have a good transition, it's likely your fertility is going to be good, based on the fact that the other components we spoke about are functioning well. Body condition score at calving is a major factor to a cow doing well. You've got to get that right. If you don't get that right, you run into problems. And these cows don't get back in calf in an optimum period of time, and they go down the road, cost you a lot of money. Again, investing into improving dry matter intakes. Have a look at your buildings. Get a tape measure out. Is there enough room? Can we do anything else? Is there a spillover area for busy times? These are all the questions you need to ask. And again, it can help with things like mastitis as well, overstocking, mastitis, you name it. You overstock a building, you will get more disease, more problems. That goes without saying. Thanks a lot. Hopefully I've not gone too over time. 45 minutes, not too bad. Brilliant.